Tonight is Objective 3, and we're going to talk about European imperialism in India and China, but also how European imperialism relates to industrialization. Go ahead now and answer the question in the Do Now box. Why did industrialization lead to increased imperialism by European countries? Using your notes and our discussions from class. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Okay, I'm going to change the slide, but make sure you finish that. We'll go over it tomorrow. Today is a lot of political cartoons. Take a look at this one. England is in the center with the top hat. England is always going to be represented, or almost whenever he's in a human form, as kind of an overweight, ugly man in a top hat. And think about what that might symbolize. But you'll notice he has many arms, and his hand, to use a figure of speech, is in many honeypots. He's reaching over the Netherlands and Ireland, and he has hands on Jamaica and Canada and the Suez Canal, India, Australia, Boers Land, which is South Africa, and many other nations. So take a moment and think about what might be the message of this political cartoon. Make a note in the margin. We're going to go over it tomorrow. Okay, so imperialism is, you can read, but the policy, practice, or advocacy of extending the power and dominion of a nation, especially by direct territorial acquisitions, or by gaining indirect control over the political or economic life of other areas. Basically, it is putting your influence through power, authority, etc. in some region. Here we have another political cartoon. Remember who the overweight, ugly man in a top hat is and what he's after? But what's important to get about imperialism is it's different from colonization, but can include colonization. So colonization would be direct territorial acquisitions, but it can be other types of influence, economic, so forcing trade or forcing political allegiance, etc. Any sort of forced influence or non-forced sometimes is imperialism. So it doesn't have to be going and setting up colonies. You can have this influence indirectly without having a colony as well. So again, a colonialism is a type of imperialism, but not the other way around necessarily. So, how does industrialization, our topic from today, connect to imperialism? 3 ways. 1, industries, our industrial companies, require large amounts of raw material to make their finished products. So they need cotton to make t-shirts, they need tobacco to make cigarettes, they need gold to make coins and jewelry, they need sugar cane to make refined sugar and cakes and sweets, and they need silver for coins and jewelry. Okay. 2, small European countries get more raw materials from colonies and former colonies. So we have countries like Portugal getting these raw materials from colonies, and this leads other European countries to try to compete. So they are incited or motivated to go elsewhere and try to create more imperial ties and points of contact to get raw materials, since the European nations are competing with each other. 3rd, colonies also need, I don't know why it says mean, I see, they do mean new markets or people to buy finished products. So not only do we get raw materials from colonies, but we get people who are willing to buy the finished products. We have colonists importing cigarettes, importing sugar products, etc. So our colonies are also active markets where the goods can be sold. On the left here, you see sugar cane, not something we eat, made into refined, or at the bottom, made into refined sugar, made into a finished cake, a donut. So that's kind of the full process, the lifespan of sugar, for example. Okay, so the cycle, you could record this somewhere on the margins, etc. But industrialized countries need a lot of raw materials to make their produced goods. Industrialized countries go to these non-industrialized countries to get the raw materials because it's cheap. Raw materials are taken willingly, sometimes unwillingly, from colonies and former colonies, and this is imperialism. Industrialized countries then manufacture those raw materials into finished goods. And then they sell those goods back to the huge new markets of non-industrialized countries who can't make those goods themselves. And it's a cycle. This is still mercantilism. It's just another way to look at it where we throw in the addition of industrialization and mass production. So, British imperialism in India. The British East India Company sets up regions as the Mughal dynasty declines. So remember that the Mughals are in northern India, and actually the Dutch have occupied indirectly, just through imperialism, southern India to this point. But the British go in and try to set up and gain a foothold in India. The British East India Company uses sepoys, which are Indian soldiers. They say, hey, we'll work with you, we'll help you, let's get you guys free of the Mughal rule and the Dutch rule. And so the sepoys agree to fight at first, but they eventually lead a revolution, which is known as the Sepoy Rebellion. And the sepoys rebel, right, make sure you get this down. The sepoys rebel because the British were using gun cartridges that you need to be able to quickly slide the ammunition into the gun, and the grease that they were using was either pig or cow, it just depended, fat. And so our Hindus, our sepoys are Hindu, and they don't believe in eating meat. So when they had to use their mouths to bite open this cartridge to slide it into the gun, they were indirectly or unknowingly consuming animal products. And the British knew of the Hindu belief, and they chose to ignore it and not respect it. And that is why the sepoys rebelled. So after the Sepoy Rebellion, the British government takes control of India. So they originally acted like they wanted to help get independence, and then they were like, just kidding, we're in charge. So India then becomes a colony of the British Empire in the mid-1800s, and it is one of the longest lasting colonies and most vital colonies for the British. There is major cultural influence of Britain on the Indians. The upper castes learn English. Remember, we still have the caste system. They convert to Christianity at times. A lot of Indians go and become Western educated, like Gandhi went to England and went to college and was educated in England and then returned back to India to be a lawyer. So great influence on India by Britain. Here's another way to look at it. So industrialized countries need a lot of raw materials. The British East India Company sets up their administration in India to oversee interests, basically to make sure they're getting their profits. They use Indian soldiers to enforce demands and protect their interests. And then the sepoys rebel, so the British have to step in on their own. They can't be indirect anymore. So they can exploit the raw materials that India has, like cotton and silk and spices. This will become very relevant when we talk shortly about the opium trade. So in China, yes, there it is, the opium. We have Chinese men smoking opium pipes. Opium is from the same root kind of plant as heroin. It has similar effects. So in China, Britain introduces opium to Manchu China as an effort to trade. Remember that the Manchu conquered the Ming. And opium comes from India and the Middle East. It comes from poppy seeds. China sees that opium is causing issues for the population and their productivity. However, the British government, so the Chinese government tries to say no more opium, it's bad for our economy, it's bad for our people. And the British say, no, we force opium trade upon you, you can't decide that. And so there is an opium trade war. China loses, is forced to increase trade with Britain, and Hong Kong becomes a British colony. Today, Hong Kong is technically part of China, but they don't consider themselves part of China. They have their own little government and economy. Hint, hint, this is good for current events. There's a current event going on you could do for extra credit. Anyways, so Hong Kong is on the sea, and so Britain sets up a port and continues their opium trade. It is very lucrative. Profitable. Then we have another opium war. China says no again because opium is destroying their population, and China loses again and must trade, open trade with all European countries. So the opium wars do not go well for China. Here we have some example. The British fleet at this point is just far superior to the Chinese, the Manchu fleet, because again, they burned all the